Welcome everybody, and thank you, David. Exciting Judaism for your great learning. We're going to be learning Zohar. Particularly, we're going to be focusing on a section from Parshas Vayetze, this week's parsha. But I wanted to use it as a springboard for a number of very important foundations of how to study the Zohar and what the Zohar is about. So, everybody knows that we have what we call the Torah Shebichsav, the written Torah. And then we have the Torah Shebal Peh, the oral Torah. And they're very important distinctions because, in principle, the oral Torah is a tradition that actually defines Judaism, not so much the written Torah, because the written Torah Christians have adopted. They call it the Old Testament. We just call it the Bible because we don't have any distinction. We don't have a New Testament. So, in a way, what distinguishes Judaism is that we have the oral Torah, that we have our tradition. But within that, and what's interesting is that tradition is supposedly not written. And even if it's written in a way that's not particularly actually revealed in every aspect, not just in the hidden parts of the Torah, like the Zohar or the Ari, but even in the so-called revealed parts of the Torah, like the Talmud. We say about the Talmud that it's wealthy in one area, meaning it's very descriptive, it has a lot of information, but it's poor in another, it's very sparse. Or when there's a Mishnah that supposedly is written and it contradicts another Mishnah, so the rabbis will be like, okay, well, we have another, change that Mishnah, or there's another way of reading it, even though, well, what do you mean? That's not how you read it. But the rabbis have a tradition that it's not necessarily about what's written. That's so that you can transmit, you can give it over. It's not all about the written word. And into that, in particular, comes a specific part of Torah Shebal Peh, which is the tradition of what we call Kabbalah. And I want to just focus on the Zohar, which is a foundation work of Kabbalah. And the Zohar is fashioned like a medrash. How is a medrash different than, let's say, the Talmud? The medrash is the interpretive discourse that fills in the gaps of the story, not particularly focused on the practice of the halacha, although it does sometimes have things about Jewish practice. But Talmud is filling in what it is that we do, how to fulfill, for example, the mitzvah of Shabbat, how to bring a particular offering. Right? These things are stated in the Torah in sometimes very cryptic ways, non-specific. They're not. The Talmud and then the later commentaries on the Talmud were able to kind of create a much more articulate way of understanding a definition of something that's vague from the Bible itself, from the Torah itself. The Medrash fills in the story of what happened, for example, in somebody's lifetime, that there's an empty space that the Bible doesn't describe. Where was the person all that time? It takes up again, let's say, a story of Moses at a certain age, and then it flashes forward. Where was he during those intermediate years? What was the relationship between Esav and Yaakov beyond what's clearly in the text? What can we infer from the stories about them that can fill in the gap of what's not actually stated clearly? So the Medrash then has, by and large, a twofold objective. Again, there are many aspects of this. One is to fill in the gap of the story, and the other one is to give us a lesson, a moral lesson, generally speaking. The Zohar actually is written in part like a medrash. In fact, there are still sections of the Zohar that are referred to as specific types of midrashim. They used to refer to much of the Zohar as the medrash of the Rashbi, or Shulchan Bar Yochai's medrash. There's sections like, for example, called the Medrash Hanelam, the concealed medrash. So this idea of medrash and Zohar are very much aligned. So in fact, actually, if you wanted to understand Zohar better, you should study the Talmud, because the Zohar makes a lot of references to the Talmud. But if you want to understand Zohar even more, you should study the Medrash, because the Zohar is like a parallel Medrash on one level. So studying Medrash and Zohar is giving you kind of the perspective. One's the inner Medrash, and one is the moral Medrash. Not that the moral is outer to the spiritual world. Now I want to talk about what defines the Medrash element of the Zohar as opposed to regular Medrash. Regular Medrash is after a drasha, some nuance in a word, teaching us a moral lesson. Some word that's not there, some contrast to some other place that we can learn, a fabulous, fantastic story that gives us something that can stick into a little child's head as well as a sage, and inspire both of them, each one at their own level. While the Zohar is a complement to the Talmud, which is the law, and more, by the way, the Talmud also contains midrashim within it. So when we say Medrash versus Talmud, or even Zohar versus Medrash and Talmud, they all are different systems that incorporate the other systems. Just to borrow on what Rabbi Sammy was talking about, the variety of systems, the interface with each other. So the Medrash and the Zohar, the Medrash riffs on the Talmud, and vice versa, and the Zohar is riffing on the Talmud, and the relationship is extensive, but they still definitely have a texture that makes them identifiable and unique. Although there are some places that technically you can pull out a section of Zohar and present it to a person who is very into Medrash, and even into Zohar maybe a little bit, and if they don't know the Zohar cold, they'll think that selection is from a regular, it sounds like a Medrash Tanchuma. It's like, they won't know that it's the Zohar per se. However, the Zohar is still definitely not regular Medrash. What's the main distinction? Even within the context of Zohar as Medrash, that distinguishes the Zohar from the other Midrashic teachings. So the Zohar addresses this question about itself, and basically says that the Torah could be learnt on its most literal level, or it could also be interpreted to understand what the goal of, what the meaning of the law is that may not be clearly in the Torah, like the Talmud, like the Halacha. But the goal of the Zohar, which the Zohar says about itself, is that there's an inner dynamic between the divine and us that's at play in the Torah, and the Zohar is describing that interplay between a variety of divine levels, in which the humans, the protagonists in the particular stories of the Bible, are playing an active role in. I'll give you a classic example. So actually what's going on is the Zohar is saying that because we're created in God's image, there are conversations, revelations, dialogues, both ways, not just God revealing himself to man or woman, but more than that,